I stood in the doorway of our Malibu beach house, watching my daughter Sarah slam legal documents on the marble counter. "You have 24 hours to get out," she announced, her perfectly manicured nails tapping the eviction notice. "Mom would have wanted me to have this place." My wife Margaret had passed 6 months ago. Sarah assumed her unemployed father couldn't afford the property taxes. She had no idea her poor father was secretly worth $76 million. I just smiled and walked away. The morning sun cast long shadows across the hardwood floors as I made my way to the kitchen. 6 months without Margaret, and the house still smelled like her lavender perfume. Every corner held a memory, every room echoed with her laughter. We'd bought this place 35 years ago, when it was just a modest cottage on a cliff. Now, according to the last assessment, it was worth $2 million. I poured myself coffee from the same blue mug Margaret had given me on our 10th anniversary. Sarah's eviction notice lay on the counter like a poisonous snake. My only child, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike on this very beach, was trying to throw me out of my own home. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah believed I was just another struggling retiree living off Social Security and whatever scraps Margaret's life insurance had provided. She'd seen me in the same flannel shirts for years, driving my 20-year-old pickup truck clipping coupons at the grocery store. What she didn't know was that those habits had helped me accumulate a fortune that would make her real estate deals look like children's games. I'd started with nothing, just a kid from Nebraska with big dreams and a talent for seeing patterns others missed. My first investment was $100 in a tech startup back in 1985. That company became one of the pioneers in computer networking. By the time I was 40, I'd turned that $100 into my first million. By 50, I owned commercial properties across 3 states. But Margaret and I had agreed early on we'd live simply and teach Sarah the value of hard work. Sarah had called me 3 times since Margaret's funeral, and each call was about money. Not once did she ask how I was coping with losing my partner of 42 years. Not once did she offer to help sort through her mother's belongings or share a memory of the woman who'd given her life. I walked to Margaret's study still exactly as she'd left it. Her reading glasses sat on the desk next to a half-finished crossword puzzle. I'd been slowly going through her papers, each document a piece of our life together. Bank statements from our first joint account, the deed to our first apartment, love letters I'd written her during my business trips. That's when I found it. Hidden between the pages of her journal was a document I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I read through the legalese. It was a deed transfer for the beach house signed over to Sarah McKenna Harrison. The signature at the bottom was shaky, but unmistakably Margaret's. The date made my blood run cold, January 15th. 2 days before she died. I remembered that day with crystal clarity. Margaret had been in tremendous pain, the morphine making her drift in and out of consciousness. The hospice nurse had said she wouldn't last the week. I'd stepped out for just an hour to get her favorite soup from the deli down the coast, hoping she might manage a few spoonfuls. Sarah had visited that day. She'd insisted I take a break, said she wanted some alone time with her mother. I'd been grateful then, thinking she'd finally understood what we were losing. Now, staring at this document, I realized what that visit had really been about. I sank into Margaret's chair, the leather still carrying the faint impression of her small frame. How had I missed this? How had my own daughter become someone capable of manipulating her dying mother? The phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed Harold Garrison, our family attorney. "Pascal, I'm glad I caught you." Harold's voice was tense. "I just received some concerning paperwork from your daughter's attorney. She's claiming ownership of the beach house based on a deed transfer. I have to tell you, something doesn't look right about this. I just found the document," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Margaret's signature is on it, but Harold, she could barely hold a pen those last days." There was a pause. "Pascal?" There's more. I've been reviewing Margaret's medical records for the estate settlement. The attending physician noted that on January 15th, Margaret was given an increased dosage of pain medication. She would have been heavily sedated, possibly not fully aware of what she was signing. Can we challenge it? We can, but it'll be complicated. Sarah's attorney is claiming Margaret wanted to ensure the house stayed in the family, that she was worried about your ability to maintain it alone. They're painting a picture of a devoted daughter trying to honor her mother's last wishes. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Sarah hadn't been to the house in 2 years before Margaret got sick. She'd been too busy with her real estate empire in San Francisco, too important to join us for holidays or Sunday dinners. Harold, I need you to do something for me, I said. Pull all the records of property transfers in Margaret's name for the last year. Every single one. You think there's more? I'm starting to wonder what else my daughter did during those visits we thought were about saying goodbye. After I hung up, I stood at the window overlooking the Pacific. Dolphins played in the waves just as they had the day Margaret and I first saw this place. We'd been young then, full of dreams about the family we'd raise here, the grandchildren who'd build sandcastles on our beach. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to James's number. My nephew had always been more of a son to me than Sarah had been a daughter. And forensic accountant with the FBI, he had a keen eye for financial irregularities. Uncle Pascal, how are you holding up? I need your help, James. It's about Sarah. What's she done now? I explained about the eviction notice and the deed transfer. James listened without interrupting, but I could hear his keyboard clicking in the background. Send me everything you have, he said when I finished. And Uncle Pascal, start documenting everything. Every interaction, every phone call. Something tells me this is just the tip of the iceberg. As I gathered the documents to send to James, I thought about the conversation I'd have to have with Sarah. Part of me wanted to storm into her office and demand answers. But another part, the part that had built a fortune by being patient and strategic, knew better. If Sarah wanted to play games with her old man, I'd show her how the game was really played. She thought she was evicting a weak, grieving widower. She was about to discover that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous. I picked up the eviction notice one more time. 24 hours to get out of my own home. I smiled, remembering something Margaret used to say. The best revenge isn't getting even, Pascal. It's getting everything. Sarah wanted the beach house. What she didn't know was that she'd just declared war on someone who'd spent 40 years mastering the art of the deal. And in this game I held cards she couldn't even imagine existed. The drive to Los Angeles took longer than usual. Traffic on the Pacific Coast Highway crawled as weekend beachgoers headed home. I didn't mind. It gave me time to think, to prepare for what was coming. My 1998 Ford pickup truck blended perfectly with the contractors and service vehicles heading into the city. Another invisible old man in a forgettable vehicle. Sarah's penthouse was in a gleaming tower in downtown Los Angeles, 40 floors of glass and steel reaching towards the sky. The parking garage attendant barely glanced at me as I pulled in, probably assuming I was there to fix something. I took the elevator to the 38th floor, the sounds of music and laughter growing louder as I approached her door. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her apartment, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds. Sarah stood in the center of it all, holding court in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her guests sipped champagne from crystal flutes, while a hired bartender mixed cocktails at a marble bar. I stood in her doorway for a moment, unnoticed. My daughter had inherited her mother's beauty, but none of her grace. Where Margaret had been naturally elegant, Sarah was all sharp angles and calculated moves. The renovation is going to be spectacular. Sarah was telling a group of women I recognized as her real estate colleagues. I'm thinking of gutting the entire first floor, opening it up for better flow. The old place is charming, but it's stuck in the past. Isn't your father still living there? One of them asked. Sarah waved her hand dismissively. Not for long. He can't afford the upkeep anyway. I'm doing him a favor, really. He'll be much happier in a small condo somewhere inland. You're too generous, another woman said. Taking care of your aging parents is such a burden. Well, someone has to be the responsible one, Sarah replied. Honestly, since Mom died, he's been lost. Can barely remember to pay bills. I found 3 months of unopened mail when I visited last week. That was interesting. She hadn't visited in 6 months. The real opportunity is the Airbnb potential. A man in an expensive suit chimed in. That must be Derek, the boyfriend. Prime Malibu beachfront. We're looking at $2,000 a night easy. The place will pay for itself within a year. We've already got a designer lined up, Sarah added. Going to transform it into a modern coastal paradise. Instagram-worthy everything. I cleared my throat. The conversation stopped as heads turned my way. Sarah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession, surprise, annoyance, then a fake smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad, what are you doing here? I thought we should talk about the house, I said, keeping my voice mild. Privately, if possible. Oh, Pascal. Derek stepped forward, extending a hand with an enormous gold watch glinting on his wrist. Sarah's told me so much about you. Tough break about Margaret. She was a lovely woman. He'd never met Margaret. I shook his hand anyway, noting the soft palms that had never seen honest work. There's nothing to discuss, Sarah said, her voice taking on a harder edge. The paperwork is very clear. Mom wanted me to have the house. You got your notice. I'm being more than fair giving you 24 hours. Your mother was heavily medicated when she signed that document, I said quietly. Sarah's laugh was brittle. Oh, please. Mom was perfectly lucid. She knew you couldn't handle the responsibility. Let's be honest, Dad. You're not exactly Warren Buffett. When was the last time you even had a real job? I've done all right, I said. All right. Sarah turned to her guests with an exasperated look. This is what I'm dealing with. Complete denial. He's been living off Mom's teacher pension for years. Now he's alone, probably confused half the time, and too proud to admit he needs help. Sarah. I tried again. Could we please speak privately? There's nothing private about this, she snapped. You're embarrassing yourself, Dad. Look at you. She gestured at my flannel shirt and worn jeans. You show up to my home dressed like a janitor making scenes at my party. This is exactly why Mom wanted me to handle things. A janitor. I kept my voice level, though something cold was building in my chest. What would you call it? Sarah's voice rose. You're a 70-year-old man with no career, no ambitions, nothing to show for your life except a house you can't maintain. Mom carried this family. She was the one with the steady income that benefits the retirement plan. And what did you contribute tinkering in the garage, playing with your computer hobby? The room had gone silent. Her guests watched with the fascinated horror of people witnessing a car accident. At least I know how to handle money, Sarah continued. I've built a real business, made something of myself. What have you ever built? Dad, what legacy are you leaving behind besides debt and decay? Your mother never complained, I said softly, because she was too kind to tell you the truth. Sarah was on a roll, now performing for her audience. Do you know how embarrassing it was growing up watching other kids' fathers in suits, driving nice cars, taking exotic vacations? And there was my dad, Pascal the dreamer, always talking about his next big idea that never materialized. Derek put a hand on Sarah's shoulder, playing the supportive boyfriend. Maybe we should discuss this tomorrow. Your father seems upset. Upset? I almost smiled. No, Derek, I'm not upset. I'm enlightened. What's that supposed to mean? Sarah demanded. It means I understand now what you really think of me. And your mother. Don't you dare bring Mom into this. I loved her. You loved her so much you let her die alone while you were closing deals in San Francisco. Sarah's face flushed. I had responsibilities. Not all of us can afford to sit around doing nothing. Is that what you think I was doing? Nothing. While I held her hand through chemo, while I slept in hospital chairs for 3 months, while I watched the woman I loved fade away. Where were you? Building a future, Sarah shot back. Someone had to think practically. Mom understood that. My phone buzzed. A text from James, "Uncle P, you need to see this. Call me ASAP." I looked around the room one more time. These people with their expensive clothes and empty conversations were Sarah's world now. Margaret and I had failed somewhere along the way. We'd tried to teach her values, but she'd learned all the wrong lessons. "You have 24 hours, Sarah said coldly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You're right," I said. "I won't." I turned and walked to the elevator, ignoring Sarah's voice behind me, demanding to know what I meant. In the parking garage, I sat in my truck and called James. "Uncle Pascal, are you sitting down?" "What did you find?" "Sarah's been busy, very busy. I tracked down Margaret's medical expense account, the one set up for her cancer treatment. There should have been about $600,000 in there between insurance payouts and the fund you established." My stomach tightened. Should have been. There's less than $200,000 left. Sarah's been submitting reimbursement claims for months. Caregiver expenses, transportation costs, medical equipment that was never purchased. She even billed for staying at hotels during her visits, when we both know she barely came to see Aunt Margaret. "How much?" "Just over $400,000, all withdrawn in the last 8 months of Aunt Margaret's life." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. While Margaret was suffering while I was begging Sarah to visit, she'd been stealing money meant for her mother's care. "There's more," James continued. "I ran a deeper check on Sarah's business. That successful real estate empire she brags about, it's hemorrhaging money. She's got liens on her properties, maxed out credit lines, and investors threatening lawsuits. My guess is she's been using the medical funds to keep her business afloat." "Can you prove all this?" "Already working on it. Give me 48 hours and I'll have everything documented. Uncle Pascal, this is fraud. Federal charges fraud. She could go to prison." I thought about the young woman upstairs, so convinced of her own superiority. She had no idea what she'd just awakened. "Do it," I said. "Get me everything." "Are you sure she's still your daughter?" "My daughter died sometime in the last few years, James. I just didn't notice until now." I drove home in the dark, the Pacific Ocean black except for the moonlight dancing on the waves. Sarah thought she was evicting a weak-old man who'd accomplished nothing. She was about to learn that some of the most dangerous predators are the ones who've learned to hide in plain sight. At home, I stood in Margaret's study again. On her desk was a photo from Sarah's college graduation. Margaret had been so proud, so sure our daughter would make a difference in the world. "I'm sorry, my love," I whispered to the photo. "I'm about to do things you wouldn't approve of. But she's left me no choice." Tomorrow, Sarah expected me to vacate. What she'd get instead would be the first move in a chess game she didn't even know she was playing. And in this game, I'd been placing pieces on the board for 40 years. The eviction notice still lay on the kitchen counter. I picked it up, smiled, and dropped it in the trash. If Sarah wanted to play hardball, she was about to learn why her worthless father had quietly amassed a fortune while appearing to do nothing at all. Dawn broke over the Pacific as I sat at my computer financial documents spread across Margaret's desk. Sleep had been impossible after James's revelations. Instead, I'd spent the night planning remembering lessons learned in boardrooms Sarah didn't know I'd conquered. At exactly 8 o'clock, I made my first call. "Monica Sterling Investigations." A crisp voice answered. "Monica, it's Pascal Harrison. I need your particular set of skills." "Pascal, I was sorry to hear about Margaret. How can I help?" Monica had worked for me years ago when I suspected corporate espionage at one of my companies. She'd uncovered the perpetrator in 3 days. More importantly, she understood discretion. "I need a comprehensive background check on 2 people, my daughter Sarah and her boyfriend, Derek Winters. Financial records, business dealings, personal history, everything." Time frame. "Yesterday would be ideal. I'll pay your rush rates." Consider it done. Pascal, is this about Margaret's estate? You could say that. By noon, Monica had already sent her first report. I sat in my workshop surrounded by the tools and projects Sarah had mocked, reading about my daughter's spectacular failures. 5 failed business ventures in 7 years, each one funded by investors who'd lost everything while Sarah walked away with management fees. Her current real estate firm was her 6th attempt, and according to Monica's findings, it was following the same pattern. The boyfriend was even more interesting. Derek Winters wasn't his real name. He'd been born Dennis Walkowski, and he'd left quite a trail securities fraud in Arizona real estate scams in Nevada, and a particularly creative Ponzi scheme in Florida. He'd served 18 months in federal prison and was currently on probation. My phone rang. Harold Garrison's name appeared on the screen. Pascal, I've been reviewing those property transfers you asked about. You were right to be suspicious. There are 3 other properties that were transferred to Sarah's name in the months before Margaret passed. Which properties? The rental duplex in Pasadena, the commercial building in Santa Monica, and the vacant lot in Manhattan Beach. I closed my eyes. Together, those properties were worth another $8 million. Margaret and I had bought them over the years as investments, planning to use the income for charitable work in our retirement. All signed when Margaret was undergoing treatment. All within her last 4 months. Pascal, there's something else. The notary on all these documents is the same person, a woman named Linda Chen, who works at Sarah's real estate firm. How convenient? It gets worse. I pulled the hospital records for the dates these were supposedly signed. Margaret was either in surgery or recovery for 2 of them. The workshop suddenly felt too small. I stepped outside, breathing in the salt air that had always calmed me. Pelicans dove for fish beyond the breaker's, life continuing its ancient patterns, while human dramas played out on shore. Can we challenge them all? We can, but Pascal, this is going to get ugly. Sarah's already filed paperwork to have you removed from the beach house. She's claiming elder abuse, saying you're squatting on her property and refusing to leave. Elder abuse. I actually laughed. That's creative. She's building a case that you're unstable. There are affidavits from her friends saying you appeared confused and agitated at her party last night. Her attorney is pushing for an emergency competency hearing. So that was her game. Paint me as a senile old man, steal everything Margaret and I had built, and walk away with her criminal boyfriend to live the high life. The student had learned well, but she'd chosen the wrong teacher to betray. Harold, I need you to set up a meeting with Judge Patricia Thornton. Isn't she handling probate matters these days? She is, but Pascal, she can't discuss an active case outside of court. She won't need to. Patricia and I served together in the Air Force. She knows my mental faculties better than anyone. I just want to ensure she's aware that competency claims might be coming her way. That's walking a fine line. I've walked finer. After Harold hung up, Monica called back. Pascal, I've found something significant. Derek Winters has been in contact with a known criminal organization in Las Vegas. He owes them approximately $300,000 from gambling debts. The communications suggest they're getting impatient. How impatient? They've mentioned visiting his girlfriend's assets as collateral. Pascal, I think Sarah might be in danger. Derek could be planning something. I considered this new information. Sarah might be a thief and a liar, but she was still my daughter. I couldn't let her be hurt, even if she'd hurt me. Keep monitoring the situation. If it looks like she's in immediate physical danger, we intervene. Otherwise, we proceed as planned. Understood. There's more. I've accessed Sarah's company emails through publicly available litigation records. She's been telling investors she's about to come into significant family property that will shore up the company's finances. She's essentially pre-sold your assets. The magnitude of Sarah's betrayal kept expanding. She hadn't just stolen from her dying mother. She'd built an entire criminal enterprise around our family's destruction. I spent the afternoon making strategic calls to old contacts. Robert Chen at Pacific Holdings owed me a favor from when I'd saved his company from a hostile takeover. Maria Gonzalez at Westside Development remembered when I'd helped her get her first construction loan. One by one, I activated a network Sarah didn't know existed. By evening, I'd accomplished several things. The entire city block containing Sarah's penthouse was now under contract to one of my shell companies. Her office building had a new owner who was reviewing all tenant leases. And Derek's gambling debts had been quietly purchased by an associate who understood the value of patience. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple Margaret had loved, I sat on our deck with a glass of wine. The eviction deadline had passed hours ago. No sheriff had appeared. No locks had been changed. Sarah was probably wondering why I hadn't fought back, why her weak old father had simply disappeared. James arrived just as darkness fell, carrying boxes of documents. "Uncle Pascal, this is worse than we thought. Sarah's been planning this for at least 2 years. I found emails between her and Derek dating back to before Aunt Margaret got sick. They were discussing inheritance optimization strategies. They planned this while Margaret was healthy. It looks that way. There are spreadsheets calculating property values, tax implications, and something called parental life cycle estimates. Uncle, they were literally betting on when Mom would die. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pure cold rage. Not the hot anger of betrayal, but the icy determination that had helped me build an empire, while others saw only a dreamer in flannel shirts. James, I need you to compile everything into a comprehensive report. Every document, every email, every transaction. Make it airtight and legally admissible. What are you planning? Your Aunt Margaret used to say that revenge was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She was wrong about one thing, though. Sometimes if you're careful enough, you can make sure they drink the poison instead." James studied me with concern. "Uncle, I've never seen you like this. Your cousin is about to learn something important. There are 2 types of people in this world. Those who take what they want, and those who appear weak while building kingdoms. She made the mistake of thinking I was neither." After James left, I stood in Margaret's study one more time. Her journal lay open to a page I'd read countless times. Pascal pretends to be retired, but I see him working, planning building. He thinks I don't know about the accounts, the properties, the careful investments. He wants to surprise me someday to show me what he's built for us. My darling fool doesn't understand that I already know. I've always known. And I love him more for thinking his greatest gift to me should be a secret kept for 40 years. I closed the journal gently. Margaret had known my secrets. Now it was time for Sarah to learn them too. But unlike her mother, she wouldn't find the revelation pleasant. Tomorrow would bring the competency hearing Sarah had orchestrated. She expected to face a confused old man who could barely remember his own name. Instead, she'd meet the person I'd kept hidden for decades, the strategist who'd turned $100 into $76 million while wearing flannel and driving a pickup truck. The silent wolf was about to show his teeth. The law offices of Garrison Blackwood and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. I arrived early for my meeting with Harold, taking the elevator past floors of corporate ambition and carefully managed appearances. My reflection in the polished doors showed the same man Sarah had mocked worn jeans, comfortable flannel boots that had seen better days. Perfect. Harold's secretary, who'd known me for 20 years, didn't comment on my appearance. She simply smiled and waved me through to his corner office, where Los Angeles stretched out below us a concrete jungle where predators and prey played their eternal game. "Pascal, before we begin, I need to tell you something as your attorney." Harold started gesturing for me to sit. "Sarah's lawyer called this morning. They're moving forward aggressively. The competency hearing is scheduled for next week." "Good. The sooner the better." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Most people don't look forward to having their mental capacity questioned in court. Most people haven't been preparing for this moment since their daughter first revealed her true nature." I handed Harold a manila folder. Inside were the results of comprehensive cognitive evaluations I'd undergone 6 months ago, shortly after Margaret's diagnosis. brain scans, psychiatric assessments, and detailed reports from 3 independent specialists. Harold's eyes widened as he read. These are extensive, and they all show perfect cognitive function for a man my age, actually above average in strategic thinking and problem solving. It pays to think ahead. You suspected Sarah might try something like this. I suspected someone might. When you accumulate wealth, even hidden wealth vultures circle. I just didn't expect the vulture to share my DNA. Harold set the reports aside. Now about the properties Sarah claims to own. They're all in the Odyssey Trust. Harold's fingers paused over his keyboard. The Odyssey Trust, I don't have any records of that. You wouldn't. It was established in the Cayman Islands 35 years ago with a secondary registration in Delaware. Margaret and I set it up when Sarah was born. Every property we bought went into the trust with Margaret and me as trustees, and Sarah as potential beneficiary under very specific conditions. What conditions? She had to demonstrate financial responsibility, ethical business practices, and care for family. 3 strikes, and she's out. And the documents she had Margaret sign. Worthless. Margaret couldn't transfer properties she didn't personally own. The trust owns them, and trust property can't be transferred without both trustees' signatures or a court order in the event of incapacity. Harold leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face. She had her dying mother sign papers that had no legal weight whatsoever. Exactly, but she doesn't know that yet. Pascal, this is brilliant, but why didn't you tell me about this trust years ago? Because until 6 months ago, I hoped I'd never need to use it against my own daughter. We spent the next hour reviewing the trust documents and planning our legal strategy. Then I moved on to the next phase of my plan. My next stop was a nondescript office building in Culver City. From the outside, it looked like it housed dentists and tax preparers. The 20th floor told a different story. Bronze letters on mahogany doors announced Meridian Capital Holdings. Mr. Harrison, the receptionist stood quickly. Mr. Chen is expecting you. Robert Chen had started with nothing just like me. Unlike me, he'd been flashy about his success. His office showcased it modern art panoramic views and a desk that cost more than most people's cars. But beneath the show, Robert was sharp as a surgical scalpel. Pascal, you old ghost. Robert embraced me warmly. When you called yesterday, I couldn't believe it. 5 years since you've asked for anything. I need to cash in that favor, Robert. After what you did for me, I owe you my entire empire. What do you need? I explained about Sarah's penthouse building. Robert listened, his expression growing darker with each detail. Your own daughter, Pascal, I'm sorry. Don't be. I need you to buy the building through one of your subsidiaries. Make it look like a standard acquisition. And then you review the tenant leases. I'm particularly interested in Unit 3812. Robert's eyes glinted. Her penthouse. You want her evicted? I want her to understand what it feels like to have 24 hours to leave your home. Consider it done. What else? There's a commercial property in Santa Monica. Sarah's real estate firm leases the top floor. I need that building too. You're dismantling her entire life. She dismantled mine first. She just didn't realize I had backup pieces on the board. Robert made several calls while I waited. Within an hour, both properties were under contract to his holding companies. The beauty of cash purchases they could close in days, not months. My final stop of the day was the most delicate. Maria Gonzalez ran the largest construction company on the West Coast, but she hadn't forgotten her roots. We met at a small taco stand in East Los Angeles, where she'd taken me 20 years ago to celebrate her first $1 million contract. Pascal Harrison at a taco stand. She laughed, hugging me. Still pretending to be a nobody. It served me well. How's Margaret? I've been meaning to visit. The words hit harder than expected. She passed 6 months ago. Cancer. Maria's face crumbled. Oh, Pascal, I'm so sorry. She was a wonderful woman. Yes, she was. We found a quiet table away from the lunch crowd. I explained why I'd come, watching Maria's expression shift from sympathy to anger. Sarah's doing this. That little girl who used to play in your office while you helped me with loan applications. People change. Not that much. This is cruel, Pascal. What do you need? Information. You've worked with most of the real estate developers in the city. What's the word on Sarah's firm? Maria pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. Harrison Luxury Properties. They're blacklisted by half the contractors in town. Non-payment breach of contract the works. She owes my company a loan about $50,000 for a renovation we did last year. Would you be willing to file a lien? I've been planning to anyway. But Pascal, if you want to really shake things up, I can do better. There's a contractors association meeting next week. If I mention that it's time to collect on Harrison Luxury Properties debts, every contractor she owes would file simultaneously. Exactly. It would trigger a cascade of legal actions. Her business credit would tank overnight. I considered this. It was aggressive, but then again, so was trying to steal your parents' entire life's work. Do it. As the afternoon wore on, I made more strategic moves. A call to a contact at the credit bureaus to flag potential fraud on accounts connected to Margaret's estate. A meeting with a forensic accountant to trace the missing medical funds. An appointment with a private banker to ensure all my personal accounts were secured with additional authentication. By evening, I'd returned home to find something unexpected: Sarah's car in my driveway. She was standing on the deck, Derek beside her, both looking frustrated. "The locks haven't been changed," Sarah said as I approached. "Why haven't you left?" "Good evening to you too, sweetheart." "Don't play games, Dad. You were supposed to be out yesterday." "Was I? I must have forgotten. You know how confused I get." Derek stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. With his soft hands and designer clothes, he looked more like a catalog model than a threat. "Look, Pascal, we're trying to be nice here. Sarah owns this property now. You need to accept that and move on." "You're right," I said mildly. "I should probably talk to my attorney about that. Harold Garrison. Perhaps you know him. He handles quite a bit of probate work in the city." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You can't afford Harold Garrison." "Can't I? Whatever game you're playing, it won't work. Mom wanted me to have these properties. I have the documents to prove it." Documents can be so tricky, I mused. Sometimes what looks official isn't. Sometimes what seems valuable is worthless. Rather like your boyfriend's investment advice, I imagine. Derek's face flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing. Just an old man's rambling. Though I did hear something interesting about some debts in Las Vegas. 300,000, wasn't it? That's a lot of money to owe dangerous people." Derek went pale. Sarah looked between us, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. "What's he talking about, Derek?" "Nothing. He's just trying to confuse things." I smiled. "Confusion seems to be going around. By the way, Sarah, you might want to check with your office. I heard there was some issue with your lease." "What did you do?" "Me, I'm just a confused old man who can't handle his affairs, remember? How could I do anything?" I walked past them into my house, leaving them on the deck. Through the window, I watched them argue, Derek gesturing wildly, while Sarah pulled out her phone, probably calling her office. Inside, I poured myself a scotch and raised it to Margaret's photo on the mantel. "The pieces are in position, my love. Tomorrow the game begins in earnest." Sarah thought she'd won by stealing papers and telling lies. She was about to learn that in the real game of wealth and power, the person who appears weakest often holds the strongest cards. And I'd been collecting cards for 40 years, waiting for a moment I'd hoped would never come. The silent wolf had made his first moves. Now it was time to see if the sheep had learned anything worth knowing. The morning of the competency hearing arrived with unusual clarity. No marine layer, no fog, just brilliant sunshine that made the Pacific sparkle like scattered sapphires. I chose my clothes carefully, the same worn flannel and faded jeans, but with mismatched socks and a coffee stain I'd applied strategically to my shirt. Details matter when you're playing a role. At breakfast, I practiced in the mirror, letting my eyes go slightly unfocused, adding a tremor to my hands. Method acting. Margaret would have called it. She'd loved old movies where characters weren't quite what they seemed. James arrived to drive me to court, playing the concerned nephew perfectly. "You ready for this, Uncle Pascal?" "As ready as a confused old man can be," I replied, making sure to shuffle slightly as I walked to his car. "The recording equipment is all set," he said quietly once we were driving. "Everything that happens today will be documented." "Oh, good. And Monica?" "She'll be in the gallery. She has some interesting updates for you after the hearing." The courthouse in downtown Los Angeles was a monument to justice, or at least the appearance of it. We passed through security, my confused act earning sympathetic looks from the guards. Sarah was already there with her legal team. 3 lawyers in $1,000 suits who looked like they ate smaller attorneys for breakfast. "Dad," Sarah said, approaching with false concern. "Are you all right? You look tired." "Do I know you?" I asked, squinting at her. Her eyes lit up. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. "It's me, Dad. Sarah, your daughter." "Oh, right. The one who wants my house." "I'm trying to help you, Dad. You need care, professional care." Derek stood behind her, that same confident smirk on his face. He'd dressed for the part of concerned future son-in-law, though the Rolex and Italian shoes somewhat ruined the effect. The courtroom was smaller than expected, more intimate. Judge Patricia Thornton presided, her silver hair pulled back severely, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as we entered, and for just a moment her eyes met mine. The ghost of recognition quickly suppressed. We'd flown combat missions together over Kuwait. She knew exactly what I was capable of. "This is the matter of Sarah Harrison's petition for conservatorship over Pascal Harrison," the bailiff announced. Sarah's lead attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Melissa Crawford, stood. "Your Honor, we're here because Pascal Harrison, age 68, has shown increasing signs of cognitive decline following the death of his wife. His daughter Sarah Harrison has reluctantly concluded that he needs professional oversight for his own safety and financial security." "Objection," Harold said, rising. "My client hasn't been formally evaluated. This hearing is premature." "On the contrary," Crawford continued, "we have affidavits from multiple witnesses describing erratic behavior confusion and an inability to manage basic affairs." She presented her evidence statements from Sarah's party guests, describing my confused, rambling photos of my unkempt appearance and Sarah's tearful testimony about finding unopened bills and spoiled food in my refrigerator. "He's not the man he used to be," Sarah said, dabbing at her eyes. "Mom's death broke something in him. He needs help, and I'm trying to provide it." Throughout her performance, I sat quietly, occasionally muttering to myself, and checking my watch. Once I stood up abruptly and asked the bailiff where the bathroom was, even though we'd passed it on the way in. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Thornton addressed me directly, "do you understand why we're here today?" "Someone wants to take my house," I said clearly, then looked confused. "Or was that yesterday? What day is it?" Crawford jumped on this. "You see, Your Honor, he's completely disconnected from reality. My client is simply trying to ensure her father receives proper care while protecting the family assets. And these family assets," Judge Thornton said, reviewing the documents, "they're quite substantial. There's a beach house in Malibu, among other properties," Crawford confirmed. "Properties that Mr. Harrison can no longer properly maintain." "I see. Mr. Garrison, does your client wish to respond?" Harold stood. "Your Honor, my client has brought documentation that we believe the court will find illuminating." He began presenting our evidence. First, the cognitive evaluations from 6 months ago showing perfect mental function. Then, documentation of Sarah's suspicious property transfers. Finally, bank records showing regular, careful management of finances right up to the present day. Crawford objected repeatedly, but Judge Thornton allowed it all in. "Your Honor," Crawford said, clearly flustered, "those evaluations are months old. Mr. Harrison's condition has clearly deteriorated since then." Has it? Harold asked. Because I have here security footage from various locations over the past week showing my client conducting complex business transactions, having detailed conversations with financial advisors, and managing his affairs quite competently. The footage was devastating. There I was at the bank, discussing investment strategies. At the grocery store, carefully comparing prices and using coupons not from poverty but from habit. At the gas station, having a perfectly lucid conversation with another customer about the Dodgers' chances this season. But at my party, Sarah sputtered. Yes, about that party, Harold continued. We have a recording of that interaction as well. California is a two-party consent state for recordings, but Sarah had been informed she was being recorded by her own security system. Harold produced the full video, not just the edited version Sarah's team had submitted. In the complete footage, my confusion was clearly in response to being berated and humiliated. My questions weren't confused ramblings, but pointed inquiries about Sarah's business dealings. The judge's expression grew stonier with each revelation. Ms. Harrison, Judge Thornton said coldly, did you edit this footage before submitting it to the court? Sarah's attorneys whispered frantically among themselves. We may have selected the most relevant portions, Crawford admitted. Relevant to your narrative, perhaps. Mr. Garrison, continue. Harold delivered the killing blow. Your Honor, we've discovered that Ms. Harrison has been systematically draining her mother's medical expense account, submitting false claims for reimbursement while her mother was dying. Furthermore, she obtained property transfers through questionable means, having her mother sign documents while heavily medicated and possibly unconscious. That's a lie, Sarah shouted, jumping to her feet. Is it? Harold produced James's forensic accounting report. $400,000 in fraudulent claims. We have the receipts, or rather the lack thereof. Judge Thornton reviewed the documents, her face growing darker with each page. Your Honor, I said, standing slowly. May I speak? Are you feeling lucid, Mr. Harrison? Perfectly, Your Honor. I apologize for the deception, but I needed to see how far my daughter would go. The answer apparently is all the way to federal fraud. I straightened, dropping the confused old man act entirely. The transformation was immediate, shoulders back, eyes, clear voice, strong. My name is Pascal Harrison. I served with distinction in the United States Air Force, achieving the rank of lieutenant colonel. I built a successful investment portfolio worth approximately $76 million through careful management and strategic planning. I am not now, nor have I ever been mentally incompetent. The courtroom was dead silent. However, I continued, I am heartbroken. My wife died 6 months ago, and in her final days our daughter saw not a mother to comfort, but a mark to exploit. She stole from the dying and now seeks to steal from the living. If that makes me confused about anything, it's about how I failed so completely as a father. Sarah's face had gone from red to white. Derek had actually stepped back as if trying to distance himself from the situation. Judge Thornton removed her glasses. Ms. Crawford, I've seen enough. Not only am I denying your petition for conservatorship, but I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Your Honor, Crawford began. Furthermore, the judge continued, any documents allegedly signed by Margaret Harrison in her final months will be subject to intense scrutiny. Mr. Harrison, I suggest you pursue civil remedies for any fraudulent transfers. Already in motion, Your Honor. Good. Ms. Harrison, you may want to retain criminal counsel. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality. Sarah stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Her carefully constructed plan had collapsed in less than an hour. Dad, she said, her voice small, I can explain. Explain to your attorneys, I said coldly. Harold, please ensure a restraining order is filed. I don't want Ms. Harrison or her associate near my property again. You can't do this. Derek finally found his voice. We had a deal. The properties were supposed to what, Derek? I turned to him. Pay off your gambling debts, fund your next scam. By the way, you should check your messages. I believe your creditors have been looking for you." His phone buzzed as if on cue. His face went pale as he read the screen. "Sarah, we need to go, now." But, Bozan. They fled the courtroom, Sarah's $1,000 heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. I watched them go, feeling not satisfaction, but a deep, aching sadness. "That was quite a performance," Judge Thornton said quietly, having stepped down from the bench. "Both the confused act and the revelation." "Patricia." I nodded. "Thank you for your impartiality. I didn't do anything except my job. The evidence spoke for itself." She paused. "I'm sorry about Margaret and about Sarah." "So am I." Outside the courthouse, Monica waited with a folder. "Thought you might want to see this immediately," she said. Derek Winters was arrested an hour ago. Apparently, someone tipped off his probation officer about his recent activities. He's being held without bail. And Sarah, by my count, she'll receive eviction notices for her penthouse and office by 5 o'clock today. Contractors' liens will be filed tomorrow morning. Her business credit has already been frozen due to fraud alerts. "Good." James put a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, Uncle Pascal?" "No," I admitted. "But I will be. Margaret always said the hardest battles are the ones we fight within our own families. I just never thought our daughter would be the enemy." As we walked to the car, I pulled out my phone and made one last call. "Robert, yes, the hearing went as expected. Please proceed with the property acquisitions. And Robert, make sure Sarah's eviction notice is delivered at exactly the same time mine would have been. 24 hours to vacate." The trap had sprung perfectly. Sarah had walked into court expecting to cage a week-old man. Instead, she'd discovered she'd been in the cage all along, and I'd just locked the door. But this wasn't over. Sarah still had one move left to play, and if I knew my daughter at all, it would be desperate and dramatic. The silent wolf had shown his teeth. Now it was time to see if the lamb had learned anything about survival. The call came at 3 a.m, jerking me from restless sleep. Harold's name glowed on my phone screen. "Pascal, Sarah's been arrested. She's at the Metropolitan Detention Center." I sat up, instantly alert. "What charges?" "Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The DA moved faster than expected. They picked her up at LAX trying to board a flight to Costa Rica." "Costa Rica? No extradition treaty for certain financial crimes." My daughter had learned more than I'd given her credit for. "What about Derek?" "Still in custody. Turns out he was carrying a fake passport when they arrested him. That's federal." I hung up and made coffee, standing at the kitchen window as dawn broke over the Pacific. Somewhere in a federal holding cell, my daughter was learning what it felt like when the walls closed in. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. By 8 o'clock, the dominoes I'd set up began falling in spectacular fashion. Monica called first. The eviction notices were served simultaneously at 7:30. Sarah's penthouse, her office, even the storage unit where she keeps her files. Perfect timing. Then Robert. "The building management has given her 48 hours to vacate. We're being generous. She only gave you 24. James arrived with fresh information from his contacts at the FBI. "Uncle Pascal, it's worse than we thought. Sarah and Derek were running a complex scheme. They've done this before." "What do you mean?" Derek's previous girlfriends all had wealthy parents. 3 families in Florida, 2 in Arizona. The pattern's identical: romance, the daughter gain access to family finances, manipulate property transfers during health crises. "How much?" "Total about $12 million across 5 families. Sarah wasn't his first partner, but she was definitely his most ambitious." I felt sick. My daughter hadn't just betrayed me. She'd become a predator herself. The phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Harrison. This is Jennifer Walsh from the State Bar. I'm calling about Sarah Harrison's real estate license. Given the criminal charges, we're initiating an emergency suspension." "I see. There's more. We've received complaints from 16 clients alleging misappropriation of escrow funds. Did you know your daughter was using client deposits to cover personal expenses by another piece of Sarah's empire crumbling? By noon, the avalanche was complete. Maria Gonzalez called with an update. Pascal, the Contractors Association, filed liens this morning. 37 companies total. Sarah owes nearly $2 million in unpaid bills. Her credit cards were canceled. Bank accounts frozen. The IRS had opened an audit going back 5 years. Even her social media accounts were being deleted as clients and associates distanced themselves. I drove to her penthouse, arriving as movers loaded her possessions into a truck. The building management wasn't wasting time. Designer furniture, expensive art, the trappings of success she'd valued more than family, all heading for storage or auction. Mr. Harrison, a young woman approached, looking nervous. I'm Kelly, Sarah's assistant. Former assistant, I guess. Hello, Kelly. I wanted to apologize. I helped prepare some of those documents. I didn't know they were fraudulent. Sarah said her mother wanted. You're not responsible for Sarah's choices. Kelly looked relieved. She left this for you. She handed me an envelope with my name in Sarah's handwriting. I opened it in my truck, recognizing the expensive stationery she used for important clients. Dad, I know you won't believe me, but I never meant for it to go this far. Derek convinced me you were hiding assets from Mom that she deserved better in her final days. I see now he was using me just like I was using you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking you to understand that somewhere along the way I lost myself. I became someone Mom would hate. Someone I hate. The properties don't matter anymore. The money doesn't matter. I threw away the only things that did matter for numbers on a balance sheet. I'm sorry about Mom. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I became the disappointment you always feared I'd be. Sarah. I read it twice, then folded it carefully. Too little, too late, but at least she was beginning to see. That afternoon, I met with the other families Derek and Sarah had targeted. We gathered in Harold's conference room 5 sets of parents with similar stories. The Walkers from Phoenix, whose son had been convinced to transfer his inheritance while his father was in hospice. The Chungs from Miami, whose daughter had done exactly what Sarah did down to the forged medical documents. We thought Emily had changed, Mrs. Chung said quietly. She'd been so devoted during Richard's cancer treatment. We never suspected. They're experts at manipulation, I said. They find adult children with elderly parents and exploit family trust. What happens now? Mr. Walker asked. Criminal trials, civil suits, with luck restitution. But the emotional damage? I trailed off. We formed an informal support group bonding over our shared betrayal. It was oddly comforting to know I wasn't alone, that other parents had watched their children transform into strangers. Sarah's empire continued its collapse throughout the week. Her business partners filed lawsuits. Clients demanded refunds. The luxury car dealership repossessed her Mercedes. Even her country club revoked her membership for unpaid dues. Derek flipped on her, immediately claiming she'd masterminded everything. His lawyer painted him as a hapless romantic caught in Sarah's web of greed. It might have worked if the FBI hadn't found records of his previous scams. Then came the call I'd both dreaded and expected. Sarah's lawyer, not the expensive team from the competency hearing, but a public defender named Marcus Thompson. Mr. Harrison, your daughter would like to meet with you. No. She's willing to make full restitution, return all properties, repay the stolen funds, cooperate with authorities regarding Derek's other crimes. The properties were never legally hers. The funds are already being recovered, and cooperation should be expected, not bargained with. She's looking at 15 to 20 years, Mr. Harrison. She's your daughter. My daughter died when she stood over her mother's deathbed calculating profit margins. But Marcus was persistent. He called daily with updates on Sarah's situation. She'd been denied bail as a flight risk. Her cellmate was a woman convicted of securities fraud, who apparently gave financial advice to other inmates. The irony wasn't lost on me. A week after her arrest, I finally agreed to see her. Not out of forgiveness, but because Margaret would have wanted me to. The federal detention center was a gray fortress that seemed to absorb light. I went through security each checkpoint, stripping away another layer of the outside world, until only the raw reality of consequences remained. Sarah sat behind reinforced glass wearing orange instead of designer labels. Her perfect makeup was gone, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, like the girl who used to build sandcastles on our beach. "Dad." Her voice came through the phone, scratchy and small. "Sarah. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would." "I almost didn't." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I destroyed everything, didn't I? Everything you and Mom built. Everything that mattered." "Yes. The lawyer says I'll get 20 years if I'm lucky. Derek's testifying against me, saying it was all my idea." "Was it?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No, but I went along with it. I convinced myself I deserved more than what you were giving me. I wanted the success story, the wealthy lifestyle, the respect. I didn't realize I already had everything that mattered." "Your mother loved you," I said quietly. "Even at the end, even knowing what you were doing, she loved you." Sarah broke down completely. How could she love someone who was stealing from her while she was dying? Because that's what real love looks like. It endures even when it shouldn't. We sat in silence, separated by glass and choices that couldn't be undone. "Dad, what happens to the house? Mom's house?" "It goes to the foundation she wanted to create, helping families dealing with cancer. Something good will come from all this pain." That's what she would have wanted." "Yes. Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about lying, offering false comfort. But Margaret had raised me better than that. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You'll serve your time, and maybe you'll find the person your mother always believed you could be." "The girl who built sandcastles," she whispered. "That girl made her mother very happy. Try to find her again." Our time was up. As guards led her away, Sarah looked back once. In her eyes, I saw the ghost of my daughter buried under years of greed and ambition, but maybe still alive somewhere deep inside. Outside Los Angeles, sprawled beneath a smoggy sunset. My phone had 17 missed calls. The demolition of Sarah's empire was complete, but the cleanup would take months. Properties to properly transfer funds to recover victims to make whole. But first I drove home to Malibu, to the house Sarah had tried to steal. I sat on the deck watching dolphins play in the waves and opened a bottle of wine Margaret and I had been saving for Sarah's wedding. "She's lost my love," I said to the ocean. "But maybe not forever. Maybe there's still hope." The wine tasted of promises broken and dreams deferred. But underneath, there was something else. The faintest hint of possibility. The chance that from the ashes of Sarah's empire, something better might grow. Time would tell. Time and the kind of hard lessons that only come from losing everything you thought mattered to find what actually does. 2 years passed, like pages turning in a book I never wanted to read. The legal proceedings ground on with mechanical precision, testimonies, depositions, sentencing hearings. Sarah received 18 years with possibility of parole in 12. Derek got 25, his previous crimes compounding like interest on a bad debt. I sold the beach house the morning after her sentencing, just as the title had promised. But not to strangers. The Margaret Harrison Foundation for Cancer Care Families purchased it for exactly $1. Where Sarah had seen profit potential families dealing with terminal illness would find respite, where she'd planned an Airbnb empire, exhausted caregivers would recover their strength. The other properties followed suit. Each one transformed from a symbol of greed into an instrument of grace. The duplex in Pasadena became transitional housing for families traveling for treatment. The commercial building in Santa Monica housed the foundation's offices and a support center. The vacant lot in Manhattan Beach bloomed into a meditation garden where people could sit with their grief and watch the ocean change colors. On a gray Tuesday in November, I received a letter forwarded through Sarah's lawyer. The envelope bore the return address of the Federal Correctional Institution, where she served her time. Inside, her handwriting had changed, less confident, more careful. Dear Dad, they have a library here. I spend most of my time reading now. Books Mom loved that I never had time for when I was busy being important. Yesterday I finished To Kill a Mockingbird and cried for an hour. Atticus Finch reminded me of you quiet integrity in a loud world. I teach literacy to other inmates. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm finally contributing something real while locked away from the world I thought mattered. There's a woman here, Carmen, who never learned to read because she was too busy surviving. Watching her sound out her daughter's letters makes my real estate deal seem like sandcastles at high tide. I think about Mom every day. Not the mom I disappointed, but the one who taught me to tie my shoes and make chocolate chip cookies from scratch. Do you remember how she used to quiz us during dinner random facts about everything? Knowledge is wealth you can never lose, she'd say. I understand now what she meant. I know you sold the house. Good. It was never really mine anyway. Nothing ever was. I was just borrowing beauty I hadn't earned living in spaces I didn't deserve. Here I have a cell 6 by 8 feet, and somehow it feels more honest than my penthouse ever did. Derek testified against me last month. Painted me as the mastermind while he was just a lovesick fool. The prosecutor showed emails where he bragged about landing another rich mark. I was just a stepping stone to bigger scams. The funny thing is, I'm grateful. Prison is awful, but living his lie would have been worse. There's a program here in Guatemala, not a vacation, real work. Building houses for indigenous families, teaching in schools without electricity. If I maintain good behavior and complete my education credits, I might qualify in 3 years. It's not freedom, I'd still be serving my sentence, but it would be something. A chance to build instead of take. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that your daughter, the real one, not the stranger I became, is still in here somewhere. Maybe she always was just buried under ambition and greed like debris after a storm. Tell the dolphins I said hello. Tell the ghost of Mom I'm sorry. Tell yourself that maybe someday the little girl who built sandcastles will walk out of here, ready to build something real. All my love, Sarah. P.S. They let me keep one photo. It's of you, Mom, and me at my college graduation. We all look so happy. So whole. I study it like evidence of a crime I committed against joy itself. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in the foundation office that used to be her real estate headquarters. Outside families came and went, finding support in their darkest hours. Margaret's dream made manifest through Sarah's downfall. That evening, I met with the other parents from our support group. We gathered monthly, now sharing updates and small victories. The Walkers had reconciled with their son after he completed rehab. The Chungs were guardedly rebuilding their relationship with Emily, who'd turned state's evidence and received a lighter sentence. Redemption is possible, Mrs. Chung insisted, though her eyes suggested she was trying to convince herself. People can change. But trust, Mr. Walker added quietly. Trust takes longer to rebuild than any fortune. 3 years later, I stood in the customs line at Los Angeles International Airport, waiting for a flight to Guatemala City. The immigration officer glanced at my passport. Business or pleasure? Neither, visiting family. The compound where Sarah worked sat on a hillside overlooking Lake Atitlan. Volcanic peaks rose like guards around water, so blue it hurt to look at. The buildings were simple concrete blocks, but flowers grew everywhere, bougainvillea and hibiscus painting the walls in defiant color. I found her teaching in an open-air classroom showing children how to use computers donated by the foundation. She wore a simple cotton dress her hair grown long and streaked with premature gray. When she saw me, her hands stilled on the keyboard. "Class dismissed for lunch," she said in Spanish. The children scattered like birds, laughing and calling to each other. We stood facing each other across 20 feet and a lifetime of choices. "Dad." The word carried 3 years of letters of progress reports from counselors of small steps toward becoming human again. Sarah. She didn't rush to embrace me, didn't presume forgiveness. Instead, she gestured to a bench under a jacaranda tree. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "I didn't think you would." "Your mother would have. Mom would have come sooner, with cookies and unconditional love." "Yes, but I'm not your mother." We sat in silence watching hummingbirds dart between flowers. The lake changed colors with the shifting clouds, blue to green to silver, and back again. "I read your reports," I said eventually. "Your work here is good. Real. It's the first real thing I've done since building sandcastles. Everything else was just performance, playing a role I thought would make me important." "Are you happy?" She considered this. "I'm useful. I'm honest. I sleep without pills and wake without dread. If that's not happiness, it's close enough." A little girl ran up, tugging on Sarah's dress and chattering in rapid kachikal. Sarah responded fluently, making the child giggle before sending her off to lunch. "You learned the language?" "Had to. English and Spanish weren't enough. These kids deserve teachers who meet them where they are not where we think they should be." She paused. "Mom would have loved this place. The children, the mountains, the way morning mist rises off the lake like prayers." "She would have," I agreed. "Dad, I need to tell you something. About the night she died." I tensed but nodded for her to continue. "I was there. Not when you were, but later. The nurse called me, said Mom was asking for me. I almost didn't go. I was at a closing about to make a huge commission, but something made me leave." She twisted her hands, the same gesture she'd had as a child when confessing to breaking something. "She was lucid for maybe 5 minutes, completely clear. She told me she loved me, told me she knew what I was becoming and loved me anyway. Then she said something I'll never forget. 'Your father has gifts for you, Sarah. Not money, not property. Chances to choose better.' I thought she was delirious." "She knew," I said softly. "Somehow she always knew everything. The properties, the schemes, all of it. All of it. We planned our response together those last weeks. She made me promise to let you fall completely before offering a way back up." Sarah's tears came then, not the hysterical sobs of the detention center, but quiet grief for chances missed and love squandered. She played the long game even while dying. She played the only game that mattered, believing her daughter could find her way home. We talked until the sun began its descent behind the volcanoes. About the Foundation's work, about the families we'd helped with the properties Sarah had tried to steal, about the children here who called her Maestra Sarah and trusted her with their futures. "I have 9 more years on my sentence," she said, as shadows grew long. 7 if I maintain this level of service. Could you visit again?" I thought of Margaret, of the love that endures even when it shouldn't, of second chances and third chances and the infinite possibility of redemption. Every year, I promised. On her birthday, we'll remember who she was and who you're becoming. "And the house, do families use it?" "Constantly. Last month, a woman with terminal brain cancer spent her last good weeks there with her children. They built sandcastles every morning just like you used to." Sarah smiled through her tears. "That's perfect. That's what Mom would have wanted." As I prepared to leave, she handed me an envelope. "For the Foundation. It's not much, but the kids here do craft work. We sell it to help fund the school. I want some to go back to families like ours, broken ones trying to heal." Inside were hand-woven bracelets in brilliant colors, each one unique, each one a small act of creation in a life that had known too much destruction. "I'll make sure they get them," I said. We embraced then carefully, like handling broken glass that might still cut. But underneath the sharp edges, something softer was growing. Not trust, not yet, but hope. Flying home over dark water and sleeping cities, I held one of the bracelets up to the reading light. The pattern was intricate threads, interwoven so tightly it was impossible to see where one color ended and another began. Like families, like love and pain, and the possibility of forgiveness. At customs in Los Angeles, the officer asked if I had anything to declare. "Just hope," I said, which earned me a strange look but no additional screening. The beach house stood lit against the night windows, glowing with warmth. A family from Oregon was staying there, the father undergoing treatment at UCLA. Through the windows, I could see them gathered around the same table where Margaret and Sarah and I had shared countless meals, where dreams were born and eventually betrayed, but also where love persisted stubborn and enduring as the tides. I drove to my new apartment, small, sufficient, honest, and placed Sarah's letter in a box with the others. 18 years would pass before she walked free. By then, I'd be in my 80s, if I lived that long. But Margaret had been right. The greatest inheritance we leave our children isn't money or property. It's the chance to choose better, even when every previous choice has led to ruin. The next morning, I walked the beach where Sarah had played as a child. The waves erased footprints as fast as people made them, but somehow that seemed right. Every tide a new beginning. Every sunrise a chance to build something better than before. In my pocket, her bracelet caught the light threads of possibility woven by hands learning to create instead of destroy. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a start. And sometimes a start is all we need to begin again. If you've made it this far in my story, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to choose between justice and mercy when someone you loved betrayed you? What did you choose, and do you still believe it was right? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more tales of family forgiveness and the complicated paths we walk toward redemption. Share it with someone who might need to hear that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal with time, truth, and the willingness to see people not as they are, but as they might become. Thank you for listening to an old man's tale of loss and hope. May you find peace in your own journey, and may the sand castles you build with those you love stand strong against whatever tides may come. Until next time, remember, the most valuable inheritance isn't what we leave in bank accounts. It's the love we plant in hearts, and the chances we give each other to grow into who we're meant to be.